Joining us now in the studio today, we have with us Dr. Myong-hyun from the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Go.
Good to be here.
Now, as you just saw in that report, it's being reported that Trump has started to express his frustrations over the slow negotiations with North Korea over their denuclearization process. It seems like he's finding out, firsthand that dealing with North Korea is difficult. The concern now, though, is that Trump might consider pulling out of negotiations with North Korea and possibly restarting military action like he threatened before the summit. What do you think of this?
Well, I think the choice that President Trump is facing right now is not so binary or like black and white. I don't think just because the negotiation is not quite working to his wish, doesn't mean that President Trump can just resort to military option. There are many constraints that he's facing right now, not just within the United States, but also because the electoral cycle that he's facing right now. The November elections are coming up soon, and the American people don't want to see the country involved in other conflict before the elections, at least. And also, there are constraints from the allies, especially from South Korea, which is right now very much engaged in inter-Korean dialogue with North Korea. So it's not going to be very easy for President Trump to express his frustration, and then somehow his frustration leads to a military option against North Korea.
But, I mean, we've seen this before. Donald Trump pulled this kind of card before. Just before the summit with North Korea, he pulled out of the summit. He said, I'm going to cancel it, North Korea aren't playing ball. Do you think Trump could do something like this again?
Well, possibly, but then what could he do at this stage that would not lead to a catastrophic outcome in the Korean Peninsula? I mean, that's the reason why I keep saying that President Trump is facing a lot of constraints. Sure, like emotionally, he would like to lash out against North Korea or maybe against China, but then he understands that once he does that, there's no coming back. And then there's still, at the same time, there's still some hope left for dialogue, a successful dialogue with North Korea. I mean, North Korea hasn't really carried out any provocation since November last year. Clearly, North Korea is observing their part of the deal, which is not to launch provocations. So in that sense, there's still space for dialogue. I think President Trump is in a really uncomfortable situation in which the situation he's facing is not so black and white, which it's not going to make his choice of policy going forward easy.
I mean, it was quite an extraordinary report. They gave details about how difficult it's been, especially with dealing with Kim Young-chul, Kim Jong-un's right-hand man, and how they got stood up for 3 hours after their scheduled time that they're supposed to meet. But from North Korea's perspective, what does this kind of frustration, how will they view this Trump's frustrations? Why do you think North Korea are risking this kind of tactic, especially if there is a risk that Trump might do something rash?
Right. I mean, so as President Trump has said before, like I think publicly, I believe, it's very difficult to negotiate with North Korea. The reason is because North Korea's favorite instrument of negotiation is brinkmanship. So they wait until the very last minute and pushed and try to increase tension between the two parties up to like nth degree, and somehow they try to impose their own terms of negotiation on the other side. This is exactly what we are seeing right now. It's clear that it's in the North Korea's interest to abide by the agreement that came out of the Singapore summit. But at the same time, North Korea would like to get the best price possible, best deal possible out of this. That means they're going to hold out until the last minute, until the other side gets desperate or frustrated and offers better deal than that they are having right now from Washington. So I think that's what they are holding out for.
I mean, I think that's an important point. Don't they want this deal as much as the US does? But then who's going to fold first?
Right. So that's the thing. I mean, what the deal that the North Koreans are facing comes with a price. What they want is possibly acknowledging North Korea, being acknowledged as a nuclear state by the United States and the international community, and at the same time get some of the sanctions lifted against the country. And the price they have to pay for that is to give up some of their nuclear capability. So what they are looking for right now is to somehow minimize the price they have to pay. So they would like to keep as much of a nuclear capability that they have developed so far, and then that's what their goal. And then they understand that if they just follow what the United States wants, they'll be completely denuclearized, as President Trump has said several times, and that's exactly what they don't want.
Meanwhile, let's go over to what South Korea are doing on their front with North Korea. South Korea's National Security Advisor and South Korea's Foreign Minister were both in the US over the last weekend and a few days before that as well. Their message seems to be that South Korea is committed to North Korea completing North Korea's denuclearization, but they're perhaps a little bit more vague on sanctions, saying that they will push for their continuation of the sanctions. But at the same time, maybe South Korea needs a bit of exception because they have a special relationship with North Korea. I mean, what do you make of their trip and what do you make of their comments like this?
Well, South Korean government's goal when it comes to inter-Korean relations is very clear. The South Korean government would like to impose a firewall between inter-Korean dialogue and the denuclearization talk. President Moon has stated several times that denuclearization talk is something, it's a matter between the United States and North Korea that doesn't concern South Korea. At the same time, South Korea would like to speed up the pace of inter-Korean dialogue. So what the South Korean government is trying to do by going around to different capitals and also going to the United States and having talks with White House and all that is because they want to relay the message to the United States that the inter-Korean dialogue is like a plan B for the United States. As long as the inter-Korean dialogue is alive and it's working, then there's always some chance for the United States to take up the dialogue with North Korea, even if the denuclearization talks falls apart.
During the trip for Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa, she didn't close the door to the idea of a possible trilateral summit between North Korea, South Korea and the US at the UN General Assembly in September. I mean, there have been rumors of this coming up over the last couple of months. Do you think it could happen?
Well, first of all, we have to figure out whether Kim Jong-un would like to make that trip to New York and give a speech in front of the General Assembly, which I believe last year has recommended Kim Jong-un to be taken to the International Criminal Court. So there's a rich irony there. But besides that, I think Kim Jong-un, by nature, would like to get all the spotlight possible on himself. And the meeting at the General Assembly clearly is he's not going to get the spotlight because there are many, many other leaders present at the same time and the same place. But then it doesn't mean that he's not going to make the trip to New York. I mean, there's some chance that you make it. And it's another way for Kim Jong-un to somehow increase the leverage over President Trump by making that trip to the United States and again expressing his commitment to denuclearization. And that could be taken by President Trump as a political gift. We have to remember that September is 2 months before the midterm election in the United States. And it's a good opportunity for President Trump to showcase how he's been successful diplomatically with North Korea. So it's possible for Kim Jong-un to make that trip, but then still I think the chance is half and half for now.
North Korean state media, I mean, North Korea has been having good relations with South Korea in the last few months, but North Korean state media over the last few days has been quite confrontational on South Korea. For example, there was a report just this morning which said North Korean state media, they said, South Korea are not being active enough in reaching an agreement to end the Korean War. But there was some suggestion that Korean officials in the US would talk to the US about this. Do you think it would have been something they brought up right now?
Oh, definitely. I think, the South Korean government didn't make any secret about its objective or desire to sign the declaration of the end of the war by September or before November this year. And the reason is because they want to write in the stone the progress that's been made so far on the inter-Korean dialogue front. So clearly, they've been conveying that message. But the reason why North Korea is keep, in a way, complaining and showing their discontent, so to speak, at the speed of, progress on the, North Korea and then United States in terms of ceasefire agreement is because North Korea would like to convey the signal through South Korea that to the United States, obviously, that being the destination, that the North Korea is actually quite not really happy with the status quo. And the reason is because North Korea is facing another clog, the clog of pressure coming from the sanctions. And they would like to convey the signal to Washington that if the sanctions remain in place the way they are now, and there's also no progress made in terms of reaching the declaration of a war, end of the war before the end of this year, then I think North Korea will be quite upset, and then they are not going to abide by their denuclearization commitment. That's the message that North Korea is trying to convey.
as I said, state media has been making other attacks on South Korea as well. For example, they've been saying things like the North Korean restaurant workers who defected to South Korea, if they're not returned, that they would, North Korea should cancel the separated family reunions. And they've been saying other things like South Korea should stop admiring themselves on the progress of inter-Korean relations because they've shown little steps towards North Korea as well. What do you make of this North Korea's confrontational attitude towards South Korea right now?
Well, I mean, there are also progress being made in other dialogue fronts. But the reason why North Koreans are so focused on the human rights issue, especially in the example of the waitresses supposedly tricked into coming to South Korea against their will. And the reason is because they want to use this issue as a way to somehow defend themselves, fend off pressure coming from the South Korean domestic opinion, as well as from the international community about the need to make progress in the North Korea's human rights records alongside with North Korea's progress in the nuclearization front. So North Korea is trying to occupy a moral high ground whenever this issue might come up in the future, whether it be an inter-Korean dialogue or like a dialogue with the United States. So this is a political maneuver on the part of North Korea. But when it comes to other important issue in the inter-Korean dialogue that could be beneficial to their political aim or economic aim, they keep insisting having very positive tone with South Korea. So this is a two-pronged approach to dialogue that we have to get used to.
That two-pronged approach, as you said, there have been other inter-Korean exchanges which have been going well. For example, a joint unified table tennis team this weekend won a gold medal at the international table tennis competition, and there are other talks happening with road and rail inspection visits. What do outsiders have to understand about this dual side of this Korean relationship, do you think?
Well, it's actually very simple. I think there's no hidden message here in North Korea's actions. Clearly, as I mentioned before, North Koreans feel quite uncomfortable whenever they have to talk about human rights, clearly. I mean, this is a very controversial issue even for them. But on the other hand, when it comes to celebrating inter-Korean spirit through sports and cultural events, they're all for it. When it comes to talking about linking the two Koreas through rebuilding the railway network connection, that's all for it because it's going to benefit them economically. So clearly, North Koreans' reaction to different inter-Korean issues driven by their judgment whether this issue is beneficial to them or not. So this is a very simple equation that drives their actions.
So South Korea have this special relationship with North Korea, and South Korean officials were in the US over the weekend discussing with the US officials about how to deal with North Korea and various aspects on the Korean Peninsula. What role do you think now South Korean President Moon Jae-in and Seoul has to play in being the mediator, being the one in between North Korea and the US?
Well, clearly, President Moon would like to somehow preserve the gains he has made so far in terms of inter-Korean relations, as well as bringing stability to the Korean Peninsula. I think that his primary objective is to avoid a scenario like last year when North Korea and the United States at the brink of starting a war. So clearly, it's in the interest of President Moon to intercede in the relationship between North Korea and the United States, and then by offering another way of reaching some sort of understanding. I think President Moon believes that, if both sides gives up a little bit of what they want, be it like in terms of sanctions pressure or denuclearization, then he seems to believe that then progress can be made in the talk between the United States and North Korea. I think what President Moon would like to ask North Korea right now is to show genuine commitment to denuclearization by carrying out some of the agreements that they have reached with the United States and Singapore, such as by returning the remains of US soldiers killed during the Korean War, as well as crossing down some of the test sites. And I think at the same time, President Moon would like to ask President Trump to lift some of the sanctions measures currently in place against North Korea, which is again benefit South Korea because South Korean government would like to actually increase the scope of economic engagement with North Korea. So I think that's some of the messages that President Moon it's going to deliver to Pyongyang and Washington. But whether that's going to work out is a different question.
Well, we'll like to see whether there is some progress over the North Korea denuclearization in the next few weeks as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming in today.
Oh, my pleasure.